Good morning and thanks for staying with us. We're at the 2014 K-State Stocker Days and we're joined by Dr. Glynn Tonsor. Dr. Tonsor, thanks for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Second quarter was a great quarter for beef, not only for consumer demand, beef prices, but replacement prices were also at record highs. Is this going to flatten out?
Yeah, good summary is yes, we set records across the board. Margins throughout the industry are better than we've seen in a long time and sometimes ever. When we talk about cow-calf in particular, some of the information I shared was projections for the rest of the year as well as 2015 and 2016. The summary would be from a cow-calf profitability perspective. It does look like 2015 and probably 2016 will continue to be very good, certainly better than we've had in the past. They may or may not be as strong as 2014, but they will probably be, historically speaking, very good years. I think planting the seed for expansion. Part of what I talked about is I think we are going to expand the beef herd. I belabored that in our talk. We're sitting here at the Stocker Field Day. We talked about margins for that industry. Sticker shock of having to pay more they've ever had to pay for. 4 or 5 weight animal is part of what we talked about, but those margins are also quite positive. It takes more cash to operate if you're a stocker than it used to, so that's a lot of what we talked about, but I think this fall run as well as next year sets up well for that segment. And then finally, I talked about the feedlot industry, and the first 9 months of 2014 has been some of the better periods we've had, best since we've had back in 2003 actually, from a profitability perspective. I shared some reasons I'm concerned about the fourth quarter and early next year, mainly because these record feeder cattle prices I talked about on the cow-calf side of things are coming up to, obviously increase the cost of production at the feedlot level, and we haven't had enough of a fed cattle price increase to offset that for the fourth quarter. So round out that, I'll give you a summary, is very profitable segment for 2014. Going into 2015, most of that's going to continue.
Well, and another point you brought up is that as beef prices continue to grow, consumers are going to demand more information from producers. That's also going to play into the cycle, I would imagine, don't you think?
Yeah, so part of what I said was the good story is beef demand has been very strong. So yes, we are producing less, but people are paying more for those reduced pounds than yours truly expected. That's a very positive story. But what I was trying to convey is you ask somebody to spend more on a product, they're probably going to ask more questions. And the analogy I've used in the past, I didn't use in our talk today, was next time I go to buy a new pickup, I'm probably going to pay more than I did last time. I still have demand for a new pickup, but I might ask GM, Ford, Dodge, whoever it is, more questions, right? I'm going to want to know more about it if I want to pay $5,000 or $10,000 more than I did last time. I think buying food is the same way, and I'm encouraging the cattle producers to recognize the U.S. public who's paying more for that product may be willing to, but they're probably going to ask more questions before they're willing to continue paying record prices for the meat.
And it doesn't matter across the board for any protein, I would imagine, probably hold the same true.
Yeah, and I think it's just the whole food complex, right? As food in general, right, has become more expensive in different pockets, we're going to have more questions asked. I don't think there's any reason to be defensive about that or be upset about it. I'm really just trying to make people aware that along those lines is the information is going to have to flow through the industry in order to properly answer those questions. And when we're sitting here at Stocker Field Day, it's a middle segment in the cattle industry. They're going to have to work with the cow-calf segment, the feedlot segment, and retailers in order to tell that story appropriately.
Perfect. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to finish up with Dr. Tonsor at the 2014 K-State Stocker Days. You're watching kansasAGreport, and we'll see you in just a minute.
This segment brought to you by Kansas Regenerative Medicine Center. Your stem cells, your health, your life. Farmers Insurance, your best protection against the unexpected. Call Agent Dan Key at 785-408-5459. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. GrassandGrain.com. Blue River Traders, the finest selection of Western-style furniture for your home. BlueRiverTraders.com.
We're at the 2014 K-State Stocker Days. We're joined by Dr. Glynn Tonsor. Thanks for staying with us, Dr. Tonsor. 10-year outlook for beef. Herd expansion is something that everybody wants to talk about. We know we need to expand our herd. We've got more demand not only in the U.S., but globally we're going to have more demand on beef products, and we produce that here in the U.S. Let's talk about herd expansion over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so some of the numbers I shared were competing forecasts of how much we're going to expand. Most forecasts are we will expand. So for context, we have about 29 million cows, beef cows in the current inventory. That's down, been down for several years now. One of the forecasts I shared was 10 years from now, ERS saying we might have 33.7 million. So 4.5 million more cows. That would be about about 16% growth from our 2014 numbers. A competing forecast I shared was from FAPRI, which is a group of University of Missouri and Iowa State, who's actually forecasting less net expansion, peaking out, as you said, about 5 years from now in 2018 at never really hitting 31 million cows. So we're not even going to add 2 million in their forecast. What I tried to share with the audience is those are forecasts. Time will tell what actually occurs, but I am a believer that the first one I shared will be more likely to be accurate. We're going to add more than 2 million cows, maybe 4 or 5 million more than we have today. And the main reason I believe that, consistent with that ERS projection, is I do think we are entering an era of global demand growth for meat protein. And in order to meet that, the U.S. and other major producers around the world are going to add cows and we're going to produce more meat. I think here in the U.S. we have a comparative advantage on the grain finish side of beef things, and that will be a pull. We'll be hitting some of those higher income demand pulls, and we'll continue to export more and more of our product. And in order to do that, we're going to add more than the 2 million cows, I believe.
Well, when we talk about inputs, corn's at the lowest level it's been in many, many years. This is a perfect opportunity for someone to start expanding that herd, I would imagine.
Yeah, so 2014 is setting up as probably the best year on record for whatever we're going to call our typical cow-calf producer. So if you operate in an area where you're not hit by the drought and so forth, so for the typical person, you have very high output prices and reduced production costs, as you just said. So the margins are better than they've ever been, and for somebody that has a long-run interest in expanding, the timing is good. Now that doesn't fit everybody, right? Not everybody has a 30-year horizon or has another generation coming
or has
back.
the pastures to do it.
Right, or just the mere interest in doing it because it costs more than it used to do it. There's sticker shock on replacement. So I'm not saying this fits for everybody, but in aggregate for the cow-calf industry, I do think those margins are such that we are setting up to expand the herd. I think we are in the process of expanding the herd, and I think the next several cattle inventory reports from USDA will confirm that over the next couple of years.
And we should expect the July inventory report coming out here fairly soon, I would imagine.
The January one and subsequently the July one, both, they're important for this story because they tell us heifer retention numbers. So it's USDA's estimate of whether or not those heifers are actually being retained. And of course I could fast forward from that, 2 years later is when we actually get some beef from that. So we have a couple year story of very tight cattle and meat supplies. The question is, will it become 3 or 4? That's why we're wanting to know if we've pulled the trigger on expansion yet or not.
Perfect. Dr. Tonsor, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
We're at the 2014 K-State Stocker Days. We were joined by Dr. Tonsor, and again, Dr. Tonsor, thanks for joining us. You're watching Kansas Ag Report. We'll see you in a minute.